Title: Is Cinderella the original Girlboss failure? Chapter 1: A Kingdom on the Brink. It was 1982 in the Kingdom of Montivelle, a picturesque land tucked between snow-capped mountains and sprawling green fields. Kingdom was a curious blend of medieval tradition and modern charm, where castles overlooked bustling cities and knights rode alongside cars. The heart of Montivelle stood an opulent castle, a symbol of old-world grandeur, where the royal family presided over a realm that was evolving faster than they could manage. In 1982, the Kingdom of Montivelle was a land caught between two worlds. Its cobblestone streets echoed with the clip-clop of horses' hooves, while neon signs flickered over cafes that served both mead and espresso. This curious blend of medieval tradition and modern innovation was nowhere more evident than in the capital city of Arendelle. At its center loomed the royal castle, a sprawling fortress of stone towers and stained glass, casting long shadows over the bustling city below. The castle, with its ivy-clad walls and ancient banners, was more than a home to the royal family. It was a relic of a bygone era struggling to stay relevant. Inside, King Alden, a ruler with a taste for the old ways, and Queen Seraphina, a progressive spirit, wrestled with the tides of change. Their children, however, embodied the kingdom's duality. Prince Leon, a knight in shining armor who preferred the thrill of jousting tournaments to board meetings, and Princess Alara, a sharp-witted young woman who secretly tinkered with gadgets in her tower workshop. Montivelle was on the brink of transformation. New technologies and ideas flowed in from neighboring lands, challenging the kingdom's traditions and sparking debates in its grand halls and crowded markets. Yet, as the kingdom evolved, so too did the challenges it faced. Beneath its idyllic surface lay whispers of unrest, a growing divide between those clinging to the past and those racing toward the future. It was in this delicate balance of old and new that a story began to unfold, one that would shape not only the fate of the royal family but the destiny of Montivelle itself. Cinderella, the kingdom's most enigmatic figure, was anything but the conventional fairy tale princess. Draped in the iconic powder blue ball gown that shimmered in the moonlight, she was both a symbol of hope and a cautionary tale. Her story was one of ambition, resilience, and ultimately hilarious missteps. Cinderella, the Kingdom of Montivelle's most enigmatic figure, was a walking contradiction, a legend whose life was equal parts inspiration and comedic cautionary tale. Her iconic powder blue ball gown, shimmering like liquid starlight under the moon, was more than just a fashion statement. It was a badge of survival, ambition, and resilience. But beneath the sparkle and the storybook romance lay a tale of unexpected twists, clever improvisation, and a series of hilarious missteps that turned her into both a symbol of hope and a subject of whispered amusement. Far from the picture-perfect princess of bedtime stories, Cinderella had a knack for turning triumph into something delightfully messy. Sure, she charmed the prince at the grand ball and escaped her oppressive stepfamily, but her ascent to royalty was riddled with the kind of blunders that made her relatable to everyone in the kingdom. From losing her glass slipper, not once but twice, because apparently running in heels is harder than it looks, to accidentally upstaging her own coronation by tripping over her gown, Cinderella's journey was a masterclass in turning disaster into destiny. Yet, it was precisely these imperfections that made her beloved. To the people of Montivelle, she wasn't just the girl who got the prince. She was the girl who stumbled, laughed, and kept going. Her resilience in the face of societal expectations and her ability to find humor in even the most awkward situations transformed her from a mere fairy tale character into a living legend. Cinderella's story wasn't just about escaping the ashes. It was about embracing the chaos, learning from failure, and proving that even the most glamorous figures are human after all. In a kingdom caught between tradition and progress, she was the perfect reminder that sometimes it's the missteps that make the dance unforgettable. Chapter 2. From Ashes to Ambition. Cinderella's rise began, as everyone knew, in her stepmother's dusty attic. With nothing but a pair of glass slippers and a fairy godmother's questionable guidance, she had charmed her way into the royal ball and captured the prince's heart. But the happily ever after wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. Cinderella's rise began, as the bards loved to sing, in the cramped, dusty attic of her stepmother's crumbling manor. It was a room filled with broken dreams and patched-together hope, where the young woman had spent countless nights gazing at the stars through a cracked window. Armed with little more than a pair of glass slippers, an enchanting gown that wasn't even hers, and a fairy godmother whose advice was as whimsical as it was questionable, Cinderella had managed to charm her way into the royal ball, and, as fate would have it, into the prince's heart. But the happily ever after wasn't as straightforward as the tales suggested. For one, Cinderella quickly discovered that palace life wasn't all waltzes and tiaras. The royal court was a labyrinth of political intrigue, social expectations, and a dress code that frowned upon wearing glass footwear outside of formal events. Her new role as a princess came with endless etiquette lessons, awkward public appearances, and the constant scrutiny of nobles who weren't entirely convinced that a girl with soot-streaked hands belonged among them. Even her relationship with the prince proved to be more complicated than the fairy tales let on. While he was kind, charming, and undeniably handsome, he was also a bit clueless about the realities of running a kingdom, or doing laundry for that matter. Cinderella found herself not just adjusting to palace life, but subtly steering the prince toward becoming a better leader. And then there was the matter of her fairy godmother, who seemed to pop in at the least convenient moments, offering cryptic advice and questionable solutions. You're struggling with diplomacy? Have you tried turning the royal council into mice? Through it all, Cinderella's resilience and quick wit became her greatest assets. She tackled each challenge with the same determination that had carried her through years of scrubbing floors and dodging her stepfamily's insults. Her journey was far from the perfect fairy tale, but it was real, messy, and hers to own. A testament to the fact that happily ever afters aren't handed out. They're earned, one misstep and triumph at a time. Prince Edward was more interested in his vinyl record collection and launching a disco revival than running a kingdom. Cinderella, meanwhile, had dreams of her own. She wanted to modernize Montivelle, turning its sleepy villages into thriving cultural hubs. She envisioned art galleries, coffee shops, and sustainable farms. But her ambitions were met with skepticism. Prince Edward was charming, no doubt, but his true passion lay far from the throne. His heart belonged to his sprawling vinyl record collection, his prized disco ball, and his ambitious dream of launching a kingdom-wide disco revival. While the court debated trade policies, Edward could often be found in the castle's music room, spinning records and choreographing dance moves for his royal staff. To him, the idea of ruling Montivelle was as outdated as powdered wigs, and he was content to let the kingdom run itself while he perfected his boogie. Cinderella, on the other hand, had no intention of being a passive princess. Having spent years in the shadows of her stepmother's crumbling manor, she was determined to make her mark. She envisioned a Montivelle transformed, its sleepy villages bustling with art galleries, cozy coffee shops, and sustainable farms that would bring prosperity to the people. She dreamed of a kingdom that blended its rich traditions with forward-thinking innovation, a place where everyone, from farmers to artists, could thrive. But her ambitions were met with skepticism. The royal court, steeped in centuries-old customs, balked at the idea of change. Art galleries, coffee shops. One noble scoffed during a council meeting. What's wrong with the annual jousting tournament and the cheese festival? Even the villagers were hesitant, viewing Cinderella's ideas as lofty and impractical. Her plans for sustainable farms were dismissed as fancy talk, and her proposal to convert an abandoned fortress into a cultural center was met with outright laughter. Even Edward, with his sequin jumpsuits and love for reinvention, wasn't entirely on board. "Why not just turn the villages into disco hubs?" he suggested one evening, spinning a record while Cinderella pored over plans for an eco-friendly market square. "We could call it Grooveville." Despite the resistance, Cinderella refused to back down. She began visiting the villages herself, meeting with farmers, artists, and merchants to understand their needs and build alliances. Slowly, she won over skeptics with her practicality, charm, and determination. Her vision wasn't just about modernization. It was about creating a Montivelle where everyone had a chance to shine, much like she had when she stepped out of that attic and into the spotlight. And while Edward's disco dreams might not have aligned perfectly with Cinderella's vision, she found a way to incorporate his passion. After all, what better way to open a new cultural center than with a kingdom-wide disco gala? "You're a princess now," her stepmother sneered during an awkward family dinner. "Leave the kingdom's future to the men." "If I left it to Edward, the royal treasury would be spent on disco balls," Cinderella shot back, her sharp wit earning a snicker from her stepsisters. Chapter 3. The plan determined to prove herself, Cinderella hatched a plan to host the kingdom's first-ever cultural festival. It would be a week-long celebration of art, music, and innovation, set against the backdrop of Montivelle's breathtaking fields and mountains. But organizing such an event was no small feat, especially when half the court doubted her capabilities. Determined to prove herself and her vision for Montivelle, Cinderella devised an ambitious plan, the kingdom's first-ever cultural festival. It would be a week-long celebration of art, music, and innovation, showcasing the talents of Montivelle's people while blending the kingdom's medieval charm with modern creativity. The festival would take place in the sprawling emerald fields beneath Montivelle's snow-capped mountains, a setting as picturesque as it was symbolic of the kingdom's potential. But pulling off such an event was no small feat, especially when half the royal court regarded her plan as a whimsical distraction. A festival? In the fields? One lord muttered, "What's next, painting the castle pink?" Others dismissed her as an overambitious outsider who didn't understand the kingdom's traditions. Even the logistics were daunting. Coordinating artists, musicians, and vendors from across Montivelle, securing funding, and ensuring the villagers would attend a festival unlike anything they'd ever seen. Cinderella, however, was undeterred. She rallied her allies, including the castle staff, a few open-minded nobles, and even Prince Edward, who was thrilled at the prospect of curating a disco-themed pavilion. She reached out to local artists, blacksmiths, and bakers, inviting them to showcase their crafts and talents. To fund the event, she personally negotiated with merchants and proposed creative sponsorship deals, offering prime festival spots in exchange for their support. Despite her determination, challenges arose at every turn. A shipment of canvas for the art exhibits was delayed, a troupe of musicians canceled last minute, and rumors spread that the festival would be a disaster. Cinderella worked tirelessly, often late into the night, balancing the pressures of royal life with her vision for the event. Yet, her resolve only grew stronger with each obstacle. When the festival finally began, it was nothing short of magical. Vibrant stalls lined the fields, offering everything from intricate tapestries to steaming cups of spiced cider. Musicians played a mix of traditional Montivellian ballads and modern tunes, while a towering sculpture made from recycled metals became the centerpiece of the festival, a symbol of innovation and sustainability. Edward's Disco Pavilion, complete with glittering lights and a dance floor, was an unexpected hit, drawing crowds of all ages. By the end of the week, the festival had transformed Montivelle, uniting its people in a way few thought possible. Skeptics in the court were silenced, and villagers returned to their homes inspired by the possibilities Cinderella had brought to life. It was more than just a celebration. It was a turning point for the kingdom and for Cinderella herself, who proved that change, no matter how daunting, could begin with a single bold idea. "A festival?" Edward said, raising an eyebrow as he flipped through his record collection. "Sounds expensive." "It's an investment in our future," Cinderella insisted. "Think of the tourism, the trade opportunities. Besides, it'll be fun," Edward shrugged. "As long as there's a disco night." Chapter 4. Comedy of Errors. The weeks leading up to the festival were a whirlwind of activity and mishaps. Cinderella, dressed in her iconic gown, now slightly frayed from constant wear, oversaw every detail. She negotiated with stubborn merchants, mediated arguments between artists, and even attempted to bake pies for the festival's food stalls, a venture that ended with the royal kitchen in flames. The weeks leading up to the festival were a chaotic blur of activity, mishaps, and more than a few moments of hilarity. Cinderella, ever determined to see her vision through, took on the role of organizer, negotiator, and occasional firefighter. Her iconic powder blue gown, once the epitome of elegance, was now slightly frayed at the hem from constant wear and smudged with flour, paint, and the occasional soot mark. It wasn't exactly royal attire, but Cinderella didn't have time to care. Each day brought a new challenge. She spent mornings haggling with stubborn merchants who insisted their goods were worth triple the price. Afternoons were devoted to mediating disputes between artists, including a particularly heated argument over whether a giant metal dragon sculpture was art or a safety hazard. Evenings were no less hectic, as Cinderella worked alongside the castle staff to test festival ideas, like her ill-fated attempt at baking pies for the food stalls, which ended with the royal kitchen engulfed in flames and a sheepish Cinderella apologizing profusely to the head chef. Despite the chaos, Cinderella's determination never wavered. She personally oversaw the construction of festival stages, ensuring they were sturdy enough for both traditional folk dancers and Edward's disco routines. She organized workshops for local artisans, giving them a platform to teach their crafts, and even roped in reluctant nobles to sponsor parts of the event by appealing to their egos. Of course, Lord Pendleton, your name on the Grand Tapestry exhibit will cement your legacy. Still, not everything went smoothly. A shipment of lanterns for the evening festivities arrived broken, forcing Cinderella to rally villagers to create makeshift replacements. A rainstorm threatened to wash out the festival grounds, leading her to organize an emergency crew to lay straw and wooden planks to keep the fields dry. And then there was Prince Edward, whose well-meaning but impractical suggestions, like adding a petting zoo of peacocks, had to be gently redirected. Through it all, Cinderella's resilience and humor kept her team going. Her ability to laugh at herself, whether covered in soot or drenched from an unexpected downpour, inspired those around her to persevere. By the time the festival approached, it was clear that Cinderella wasn't just organizing an event, she was building a community, one mishap and triumph at a time. Her fairy godmother, who had a penchant for dramatic entrances, wasn't much help. "Darling, you're overthinking it," the godmother said, waving her wand and accidentally turning a pile of festival flyers into a flock of pigeons. "Just sprinkle a little magic and everything will fall into place." "That's not how planning works," Cinderella muttered, brushing feathers off her gown. Chapter 5. The festival. When the festival finally opened, it was a spectacular sight. Castle grounds were transformed into a vibrant tapestry of color and sound. There were art exhibits in the Great Hall, food stalls in the courtyard, and live performances on a stage framed by the majestic mountains. When the festival finally opened, it was as if the kingdom of Montivelle had stepped into a dream. Castle grounds, once somber and stoic, were alive with a vibrant tapestry of color, sound, and energy. Every corner of the estate had been transformed into a celebration of art, culture, and community. The Great Hall, usually reserved for royal banquets, had become an art gallery, its stone walls adorned with paintings, tapestries, and sculptures from Montivelle's most talented artists. Visitors wandered through, marveling at the eclectic collection, a mix of traditional pieces and bold modern creations, including the much-debated metal dragon sculpture, which had been strategically placed near the entrance to spark conversation. In the courtyard, the scent of roasted chestnuts, spiced cider, and freshly baked bread wafted through the air. Food stalls lined the cobblestone paths, offering everything from hearty stews to delicate pastries. Villagers mingled with nobles, bonding over shared meals and marveling at the array of culinary delights. Even Cinderella's infamous pie disaster had a happy ending, as the head chef, inspired by her efforts, created a signature dessert, a golden apple tart named Cinderella's Flame. The main stage, set against the backdrop of Montivelle's majestic mountains, was the heart of the festival. Throughout the day, it hosted a dazzling lineup of performances, lively folk dances, haunting ballads, and even a surprise appearance by Prince Edward, who unveiled his disco pavilion with a dramatic spin under the glow of a glittering disco ball. Crowd erupted in cheers as villagers, nobles, and knights alike joined him in a jubilant dance-off, proving that music truly united the kingdom. Beyond the main attractions, there were smaller wonders waiting to be discovered. Hidden alcoves became storytelling nooks where bards shared legends of Montivelle. A tent tucked near the gardens offered hands-on workshops, teaching everything from pottery to sustainable farming techniques. Children giggled as they ran through a maze of wildflowers, where local weavers demonstrated their craft. As the sun dipped below the mountains, lanterns illuminated the grounds, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Fireworks lit up the night sky, their colors reflected in the shimmering lake nearby. Villagers and nobles alike stood side by side, their faces turned upward, united in awe. For Cinderella, watching the kingdom come alive was a moment of quiet triumph. It wasn't just a festival, It was proof that Montivelle could embrace both its heritage and its future. The skeptics in the court, once so vocal in their doubts, had fallen silent, their disapproval replaced by grudging admiration. Standing on the castle steps, her gown now repaired and sparkling under the lantern light, Cinderella knew this was only the beginning. Montivelle was changing, and so was she. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a story for the entire kingdom. Cinderella, exhausted but radiant, walked among the crowds, her gown catching the golden light of the setting sun. The festival was a resounding success, drawing visitors from neighboring kingdoms and silencing her critics. Cinderella, exhausted but radiant, strolled through the lively festival grounds, her iconic gown catching the golden hues of the setting sun. The air buzzed with laughter, music, and the hum of countless conversations. Everywhere she turned, there were signs of success. Villagers and nobles mingling as equals, children darting between food stalls, and artists proudly showcasing their creations to wide-eyed visitors. The festival had exceeded even her wildest dreams. Word had spread beyond Montivelle's borders, drawing visitors from neighboring kingdoms who marveled at the kingdom's unique blend of tradition and innovation. Delegations from far-off lands wandered the art exhibits, tasted the local delicacies, and joined in the jubilant dances. Merchants reported record sales, and the artists who had once doubted the festival's impact were already receiving commissions for their work. As Cinderella walked among the crowds, she was met with smiles, cheers, and heartfelt thanks. Villagers who had once been skeptical now greeted her with pride, their initial doubts replaced by admiration for her vision and determination. Even the nobles who had scoffed at her ideas seemed to have softened, some openly praising her for uniting the kingdom in such a spectacular way. She paused at a stall where a young artist was painting portraits of festival-goers. The girl looked up, her face lighting with recognition. "Princess Cinderella," she said, her voice filled with awe. "Thank you for giving us this chance. I never thought I'd have a place to share my work." Cinderella smiled, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "The talent was always here," she said warmly. "It just needed a stage." As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the castle grounds, Cinderella found herself standing near the main stage. Prince Edward was in the middle of an impromptu encore performance, leading a group of villagers in a disco routine that had everyone laughing and clapping along. His sequin jacket sparkled under the lantern light, and for a moment Cinderella felt a pang of affection for his unorthodox charm. She turned to survey the festival one last time, taking in the vibrant tapestry of her kingdom. This wasn't just a personal victory, it was a triumph for Montivelle, a step toward the future she had always envisioned. The festival had silenced her critics, not through defiance but by proving what was possible when tradition and progress worked hand in hand. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Cinderella let out a contented sigh. The journey had been far from easy, but standing here, surrounded by the joy and unity she had helped create, she knew it had been worth every challenge. This was more than a festival. It was the beginning of a new chapter for Montivelle and for her. Edward, true to his word, hosted a disco night that became the talk of the festival. Even Cinderella couldn't resist joining in, her glass slippers sparkling under the disco ball. Edward, ever the showman, had promised a disco night to remember, and he delivered in spectacular fashion. Castle's grand ballroom, usually reserved for formal banquets, had been transformed into a dazzling dance floor. Multicolored lights swirled across the room, and a massive disco ball hung from the ceiling, casting shimmering reflections on the ornate walls. The music, curated from Edward's prized vinyl collection, pulsed with infectious energy, drawing a crowd that spilled out into the adjoining halls. Villagers, nobles, and even visiting dignitaries couldn't resist the allure of the beat. Edward, dressed in a sequin jacket that caught the light with every move, was at the center of it all, leading the crowd in a dance-off that had everyone cheering. His enthusiasm was as contagious as the music, and soon even the most reserved guests found themselves tapping their feet or attempting Edward's signature spins. Cinderella, watching from the edge of the dance floor, couldn't help but laugh at the sight of knights and courtiers attempting disco moves in their formal attire. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure if she should join in. But when Edward spotted her and extended a hand, the crowd erupted into cheers, urging her onto the floor. With a playful smile, she stepped forward, her glass slippers catching the kaleidoscope of lights. The crowd parted as she joined Edward, who immediately twirled her into the center of the room. The two moved in perfect harmony, Cinderella's graceful steps complementing Edward's exuberant flair. Her iconic gown swirled around her as she spun, the delicate fabric shimmering under the disco ball like liquid starlight. The crowd clapped and cheered, their laughter echoing through the ballroom as Cinderella let herself go, dancing with a joy she hadn't felt in years. The weight of court politics, the festival's challenges, and her own insecurities melted away with every step. For once, she wasn't a princess or an organizer. She was just Cinderella, a girl who loved to dance. As the night wore on, the dance floor became a symbol of unity. Villagers danced alongside nobles, barriers dissolving in the shared rhythm of the music. Even the skeptics in the royal court found themselves swaying awkwardly to the beat, their rigid personas softened by the night's infectious energy. When the final song played, a slower, soulful melody, Edward and Cinderella found themselves at the center of the crowd once more. He bowed dramatically, and she curtsied in return, both of them laughing as the room erupted in applause. As the disco night wound down and the guests reluctantly left the ballroom, one thing was clear. Edward's disco night wasn't just the talk of the festival. It was a moment that cemented his and Cinderella's place in Montivelle's evolving story. Together, they had proven that even the most unlikely ideas could bring a kingdom together. Chapter 6. The happy ending. As the festival drew to a close, Cinderella stood on the castle balcony, overlooking the bustling city below. The event had not only boosted Montivelle's economy, but also brought its people closer together. For the first time, she felt truly at home in her role as princess. As the festival drew to a close, Cinderella found herself standing on the castle's grand balcony, gazing out at the city below. The view was breathtaking. Lanterns glowed warmly along the cobblestone streets, and the hum of laughter and music drifted up from the festival grounds. Even in the fading light, the energy of Montivelle was palpable, a kingdom no longer divided by tradition and progress, but united in celebration. The festival had been more than a success. It had brought visitors from neighboring kingdoms, revitalized local businesses, and boosted Montivelle's economy in ways the royal court hadn't thought possible. Merchants and artisans were already planning for next year's event, inspired by the overwhelming response. But more importantly, the festival had brought the people of Montivelle closer together. Villagers and nobles, once separated by rigid hierarchies, had danced, dined, and created side by side. For the first time, the kingdom felt like a true community. Cinderella leaned against the stone railing, her iconic gown fluttering gently in the cool evening breeze. For so long, she had struggled to find her place in the royal world, where every move was scrutinized and every idea met with skepticism. But tonight, as she looked out at the city alive with joy and possibility, she felt something she hadn't before, a deep sense of belonging. She thought back to the whirlwind weeks leading up to the festival, the late nights, the countless setbacks, the moments of doubt. It had been far from easy, but standing here now, she realized that every challenge had been worth it. Montivelle wasn't just her home. It was her responsibility, her passion, and her purpose. Prince Edward joined her on the balcony, still wearing his sequin jacket from the disco night. He handed her a cup of spiced cider, a knowing smile on his face. "Not bad for a wild idea, huh?" he teased, leaning casually against the railing. Cinderella laughed softly, taking a sip of the cider. "Not bad at all," she replied, her eyes twinkling. "Though I think your disco pavilion might have stolen the show." Edward grinned. "What can I say? The people love a good boogie." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the festival lights twinkle like stars below. "You know," Edward said, his tone more serious, "you've done something incredible here. You didn't just throw a festival, you brought the kingdom together. That's something no ball or decree could ever do." Cinderella turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "I couldn't have done it alone," she said. "This was about all of us, our people, our kingdom, and what we can achieve when we work together." As the last fireworks lit up the night sky, Cinderella felt a quiet sense of triumph. For the first time, she wasn't just the girl in the glass slippers or the princess who married the prince. She was a leader, a visionary, and someone who had made a real difference. And as the cheers from the festival reached the balcony, she knew this was only the beginning. Montivelle's future was bright, and so was hers. Edward joined her, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "To the real girl boss of Montivelle," he said, raising a toast. Cinderella laughed. "If by girl boss you mean someone who fails spectacularly but keeps going anyway, then I'll take it." 2 clinked glasses, the stars above them shining as brightly as the future Cinderella had fought to create. In that moment, she realized that failure wasn't the end. It was just another step on the path to success.
The Stories book is a captivating collection of tales that traverse diverse genres and emotions, spanning the realms of fantasy, science fiction, romance, and mystery. Each narrative is a journey into the unexpected, weaving intricate plots and compelling characters. With a skillful blend of vivid imagery and thought-provoking themes, this anthology invites readers to explore the depths of imagination and discover the universal threads that connect us all. From heartwarming moments to spine. We hope you enjoyed these captivating video stories. Be sure to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming content like this. Thanks for watching, and keep spreading the video story.